Hello again, YouTubers. Welcome to my next video. This video is all about the group Liberation Unleashed, which also has a website. Criticism about Liberation Unleashed, information about it, detail about why I'm criticising them. Although it isn't a disrespectful criticism, because there is some positive things you can get out of Liberation Unleashed, but there is also some major pitfalls and major issues with it as well, which I will detail in this video. So, first of all, what is Liberation Unleashed? Well, it's a group of people and a website who are dedicated to getting people to realise no inherent self, no self. And through a process which they go through with the person that comes to them, they get them to realise that there is no inherent self. The problems, though, in my opinion, come when the realisation is also attached with new beliefs. And I'll detail that in this video. My main position of criticism, which I'll be using throughout this video, lies on several points. First of all, the realisation that there is no inherent self doesn't change anything. That is it. A person realises that there is no inherent self. That's all. Further claims are not helpful, and also further claims might actually be a detriment to the person who is actually realising. Also, I notice that with the realisation comes the potential to fall into nihilism, or to pick up new nihilistic beliefs. And in my opinion, that is very, very detrimental. Mainly because not only is it an incorrect position to land on, it also prevents, or even doesn't even allow for the possibility of further realisations. Realising that there is no inherent self is just the first one of many, many, many realisations that a person could actually have. Albeit, you could argue, quite rightly, that it's the most important one, because what is the self? What is I? What is me? It's like the ground of all our beliefs and the way we relate to the world, so it's a very important one. But it is not the only one. Also, it's important to note that the realisation that there is no inherent self doesn't directly affect or alter suffering. Depression, anxiety, fear, anger, etc., etc. It is a necessary step, and it is an important step along the road to alleviating suffering. Not dismissing that. But if a person is going specifically for the realisation to alleviate mental suffering, it's not going to do it. And in fact, in my experience, many people have gone through the LU process and suffering has not changed at all. And why should it? Because all they're examining is the self, for the realisation that there is no inherent self. Mental suffering is something else. It's different. It's a different inquiry, and requires a different method of approach. Indeed, suffering can be examined later, providing, this is the crux of my criticism, you don't land in nihilism or rejection or spiritual bypassing. And that is what I'm going to detail in this video. And that's the main error I see with Liberation Unleashed. Also, there is the problem of reification of certain things. Now, bear with me. Reification is simply to take something which is an abstract concept, but refer to it as if it was a real thing. That is a problem. It's a problem, first of all, because it's incorrect. Secondly, and more importantly, it may prevent a person from gaining other realisations. And certainly it might be just a new position, a new belief to land on, a new position to argue from, that my belief is the truth and your belief is not the truth. And that is not the realization. The realization is to see how the illusion operates, not to land on new beliefs. That's the crux. I'll just say that again. The realization is to see how the illusion operates and nothing changes. It is not to go from one point of belief to another point of belief. Anyway, let's go through a few of the web pages on the Liberation Unleashed website and really go through it and see what we can find, and I'll pull out my criticisms and the problems that I see within the pages. Okay, this is their website. And at the top left it says, a global movement dedicated to helping you to free your mind from the illusion of separate self. I'm not going to criticise that too much. As an introduction, that's fine. But it does subtly suggest that there is a you, a real you, that will free a mind from an illusion. And then they explain, do you exist? It's a strange question and it's not something we normally ask, but what if the answer is no? There is no you. There is no separate self in the way it's thought to exist. Would you have the courage and curiosity to find out for yourself? So straight away that is a subtle pointer to nihilism. The answer is no, there is no you. You do not exist. My criticism here straight away is, although they do say no separate self in the way it's thought to exist, the way this is written is in a nihilistic form. There are two ways this could actually go, this sentence. It would allow you to see through some sort of illusion, or it would allow you to realise that you don't exist. Those are actually two separate areas. And this is one of the main issues I have with Liberation Unleashed, is its a tendency for nihilism. There is no you, you do not exist. Such wording points to just a new belief. Essentially going from one belief, yes I do exist, there is a me, to a new belief, I don't exist, there is no me. Such a statement, such a pointing in that way does not help. Landing on a position of nihilism does not assist, and I'll go into that further why it doesn't assist a little later on when I explain further about other realizations that it's possible to have, not necessarily just this one. They go on, Liberation Unleashed is here to help you see through the illusion of a separate self. Okay, that's fair enough. A global internet-based community, that's fine. An ever-growing movement of volunteer guides, that's fine too. On the left, in small print, we have everything is conceptual except direct experience. And that is a problem, straight away. Neither of the two main paths to enlightenment, which is the Buddhist 10 fetters emptiness way or the Advaita way, would suggest such a thing. And this is another problem, a major problem I have with Liberation Unleashed, is the reification of direct experience. Reification simply means to make an abstract concept into something concrete, something real. And this is unfortunately what the Liberation Unleashed group do, and other groups on the internet where they also do this. If I compare such a thing to Advaita, for example, Advaita does, and the direct path do have a way where the only thing that is to be found is awareness, although that is never held as being an absolute. And indeed, towards the end of the direct path, even awareness itself is seen through to also be illusory. But unfortunately, straight away, Liberation Unleashed are giving you a new belief. Everything is conceptual except direct experience. That is a new belief for you to latch onto. And they will qualify this by the suggestion, can you find anything other than direct experience? And that's their way of the suggestion that all there is direct experience, except everything else which is conceptual. Although it may not be straightforward to see this, direct experience also cannot be found. as an inherently real thing. It is another mental formation. It's a pointer. That is also conceptual. Now in the guiding they use a comparison between what answer do we get mentally and what answer do we get from our experience. And as a simple way of looking at the comparison, that's fine. But what you don't need to do is actually say experience is a real thing, or to land on it like they're doing here, that they're making an exception with this thing called direct experience, and they are making it into a thing. Like I say, it's a reification of direct experience. That they're saying that is the only real thing and everything else is conceptual, and that is an error. They go on. When I ask if you can make a true statement solely based on direct experience, I am trying to get you to question the reliability and credibility of the contents of thoughts. If direct experience is the only real thing, there we go, what does that tell you about the contents of thoughts? Again, this is a problem. It might not be a problem for them within the guiding that they do, but it's certainly a problem if you were to go further with your inquiry after this particular realization, or even attempt to go further, because what they're actually subtly doing is landing you in a place which it makes you unable to inquire any further, because they are actually drawing an artificial distinction. Although obviously it's not apparent to them, or perhaps other people reading this, but they're drawing an artificial distinction a bit between this real thing that they've reified called direct experience, which does exist, and the contents of thoughts which do not exist, and that is an artificial distinction. In other paths which are credible and useful, they would not make any such distinction. They may even use that the pointer for experience or content of thought are essentially dealing with the same thing. So this particular piece of text on the left is a major problem. And in a nutshell, the main problem I have with this particular piece of text is, first of all, it's reifying direct experience. It is feeding their clients a new belief that direct experience is the only real thing. And although they may not be aware of it, doing what they're doing here makes it difficult, even impossible, to look at things after the initial realization. Because if you've landed on a belief and you hold it, that as they're saying that direct experience is a real thing, that will prevent you from looking into other things. Moving further on, a little further down, they state, this is a process of looking at what is. Now, I've actually considered that sentence several times in my own mind to try and work out what exactly they're talking about. And I don't know, haven't a clue. All I can think of is they're making a comparison between what is and what isn't, obviously. Obviously, that's because they're looking at what is, so they're obviously not looking at what isn't. But of the two, I have no idea what they're referencing. Other than a belief, and this might also point back to their reification of direct experience, that when they say we are looking at what is, it is essentially we have a belief that direct experience is what is, and that's what you're going to look at. So that could be what they're referencing here. Simply that looking at what is, in Liberation Unleashed terms, is looking at what we believe is true in comparison with what we believe is not true. And then at the bottom of the page, on the right hand side, we have a picture of a black cat, and it says, look, there is no you, there is just looking. A problem. Again, the first statement, there is no you. This is nihilism. There is no you. You do not exist. And the second statement, there is just looking. So we have a comparison there between something that there isn't and something that there is. The something that there isn't is a you. The something that there is an action, looking, a function of looking. In our normal way of considering things, if you have an action which is looking, by implication there is something separate doing that, because the word looking suggests something that is doing the function, and also suggests there is something being looked at, which is duality, i.e. two things. What I gain from this is Liberation Unleashed's belief that, again, that they reify direct experience, so they will also reify in some way looking. That looking is real, and the you is not real. That's the only way I can make sense of this particular sentence. But either way, it does not assist. It is simply suggesting a belief. Landing on or latching on to a new belief is not a realization. And unfortunately, what can happen is a person may have a realization, and because of the new beliefs they are being fed alongside that realization, they have the realization and latch onto a new set of beliefs as well, instead of just seeing what their realization actually was and just having the realization itself. In my own view, in realizing that there is no inherent self, it does not point to that you do not exist, that there is no you. What it points to is there is a you in the conceptual framework. Indeed, the world exists, or the world real, points to the conceptual framework, which might be a little bit complicated to fully understand. But the concept you, the idea you, the belief you, is perfectly acceptable. What we do is we examine that concept, that belief, that idea, and see if we can find if it points to anything real, as it is normally suggested it does. And we find that it doesn't. So the realization in words is that there is a conceptual you, but that concept, word, belief, idea, does not point to an inherently real you. So you see through the illusion that is created by the automatic believing in concepts and ideas and thoughts. Nothing changes. You do not go to a new position of I don't exist. Also, you do not latch on to a new position, as is suggested by this black cat photograph, that the function of looking is real, but the you is not real. That's a completely false comparison. If you or they wanted to, you could examine the function, the activity, looking, and see if that concept, word, belief, idea pointed to a real activity outside of conceptuality, outside of thought, and you would not be able to find such a function. It is imputed. So the you and the looking both share a commonality, although this picture states that they do not, that they are two different things, one being real and one being not real. Okay, moving to the frequently asked questions on the website. Scrolling down, it says, is this the end? No. Well, I'm actually pleased about that, because originally I've spoken to a number of members, and my general belief was that many people see through the illusion of self, see that there's no inherent self, and that is the end, no more is necessary. If your realization you had actually incorporates a new nihilistic belief, that will be the end for you. And I say why is if you do latch on to a new belief that there is no you, you do not exist, if the idea comes up of a further realization which you could have, or something else which you could look into, no matter what it is, the statement will arise, oh well, there is no me to look at it. I do not exist to look into anything. And that will be your answer. Nihilism prevents all other realizations simply because it will state there's no you to look at it. There's no you to inquire about it. You don't exist. But in praise, in genuine praise of this, they have actually said no, which is good. There's further inquiry that people can do, and there are further realizations to have. Many further realizations to have, actually. So they say seeing through the illusion of a separate self is an important first step in the greater journey of awakening to reality. Well, I wouldn't use the term awakening to reality, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that this is actually a positive statement, so praise to them. It's a necessary step, but by no means the end of the ride, so praise to them for saying that. The next line, what is next? Seeing self for what it is, a story, does not mean that your life is suddenly upgraded in every conceivable way. Now, I'm not going to attack them too much here, because obviously this sentence is just written from the perspective of somebody who hasn't seen through the illusion, and it's referencing the belief in the self, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. But this line is subtly suggesting about a real person, an inherent self that will go from one position to another. And that's a problem, but that is what the inquiry is meant for, to see through the illusion of an inherently real self. So when you start talking about an inherently real self that will go from one position to another, that's a problem. Old habits, beliefs, programming and conditioning will very probably remain in place. But of course, why should they change? The realization is to see that there is no inherent self. The realization is nothing to do with habits, beliefs, conditioning and programming at this stage. That's for further consideration. Nothing within the realization will cause a change, other than it will be realized that there is no inherent self that could change, and that is the nature of the inquiry. Awakening from the story of you allows old patterns to drop away quickly. That may or may not be true. I can give several examples of people who have done the inquiry, have realized that there's no inherent self, and suffering has increased. But I'm not going to attack liberation and release for this particular line, because as a general thing, fair enough. It could allow old patterns to drop away. But again, if a person is reading this and believes that there was a real self that will go from one position with habits, programming and conditioning to a new position without habits, beliefs, programming and conditioning, that is incorrect. Because the realization itself is to realize that there is no inherent self. Going into this sort of inquiry, holding on to a belief that there is a me that will get something, or that there is a me that will change from one position to another, won't assist. Because the realization is that there is no inherent self. The idea that there is a person is perfectly acceptable. The idea that there is a person that will go from one position to another is fine. However, if you hold on to it as being more than just an idea, that will hold you back, and it will prevent you from inquiring or seeing through the illusion. Further down, how can I function properly without a self? Won't I lose all motivation in life? Well, I suppose it's a fair question, but the answer should be, nothing changes, you just see through an illusion, that is it. Nothing at all changes. And the question, won't I lose all motivation in life, is a subtle pointer to an inherent self that will go from one position, having motivation in life, to a new position of not having motivation in life. And that's not true. The realization is that there is no inherent self. But in liberation and least favour, they do say at the end, nothing changes after awakening. Although why they're using the word awakening there, I don't know. Because this is only to see through the illusion of an inherent self. Awakening is actually something different. Unless within their language, this is awakening, hence this is the end of the road. This is all you need, and I can tell you it is not. Moving further down, and the second line I'll just address, will I never suffer again? The realization on offer from liberation unleashed is to see that there is no inherent self. It is an important step along the road, but it is not anything to do with suffering. It is an important step towards alleviating suffering, but it does not address suffering itself, and that's a very important distinction. Again, in Liberation Unleashed's favour, they do say the answer depends on how we define suffering, and that's a fair statement. If you hope to enter a life of unending bliss and only happy feelings, you're going to be disappointed. Life will go on as before. All sorts of emotions will continue to arise. So up to there, that's fair enough. But I'll just stress again, and they need to stress this on the site, and perhaps they're not stressing this on the site because they don't fully understand whereabouts this realization fits in with everything, which I must admit I didn't early on. A few years down the line and a lot of study, and I feel I'm in a position to talk about this with some knowledge. The realization that there is no inherent self does not directly address suffering. That is something else. It certainly may be that after the realization, temporarily, there will be an alleviation of suffering. There may be an alleviation of the thinking process. There may be peace as a temporary measure, but only temporary, because the realization was not to get rid of suffering. The realization was to realize that there is no inherent self. That is it. Although having said that, it is a very important step to realize no inherent self on the path to alleviating suffering, providing you are fully aware of it, and you know that once you've realized that there is no inherent self, there are further steps that you must take, and suffering can be examined. If you land in nihilism, you will not be able to do that, because, and this is the final sentence in that paragraph, yet without the concept of a central self to stick to, how can there truly be suffering? And unfortunately, that is nihilism. It may be that after the realization through Liberation Unleashed, you also latch on to a new belief of, I don't exist, there is no me, rather than seeing how the illusion is created. If you latch on to a new nihilistic belief that there is no me, I don't exist, when suffering comes up, and there is sadness and depression, anger, and you can go to someone in Liberation Unleashed, who perhaps has latched onto nihilism as well, and you say to them, but I'm still suffering, I'm still fearful, I'm still anxious, what's the problem? Their answer to you is, look, there is no you, you don't exist, what's your problem? And that's the answer, which does nothing to address the suffering. Instead, it's actually what's termed as spiritual bypassing, simply using a new belief to mask over something that is coming up. I'm depressed, oh I'm not, I don't exist, there is no me to be depressed. But I'm still depressed. Yes, of course you are. I'm anxious. What can I do? Well, there is no you to be anxious. You don't exist. And that's your answer. Has that alleviated your anxiety? No, of course not. And then the final paragraph on that page, how will I know I've awakened? Well, they're using the word awakened. Unfortunately, there is a problem with that word. If your version of awakened is that is it, I've awakened and then there is nothing more to do, then no, that's wrong. In my own view, awakening or enlightenment or however you want to call it along those lines, is when everything, absolutely everything has been examined, and the illusion of not only the self, but the illusion of everything has been examined and seen through. That is awakening or enlightenment, not simply when you've examined one particular aspect of reality, the self. This is another important point. Liberation Unleashed only addresses the self, I, me. That is it. Everything else is not examined, and everything else can be examined if you have the interest. The text here reads, awakening will confirm itself. you will come to a point where you see and know without a doubt there is no self. This is nihilism. This is not the realization that there has never been a self. Nihilism again. As I said before, we can consider this in two ways. First of all, we have the word, the concept, the belief, the idea of a self. We believe that that word, concept, idea points to a real, concrete, as I use the word, inherently existing self. The realization is that it does not. However, the word, belief, idea of self is perfectly acceptable and does not need to be rejected because, as they say on this page, quite correctly, life goes on. You cannot live a conventional life believing that you don't exist. You cannot live a conventional life believing that there is no you. It doesn't work like that. Or at least, if you try to, you will quickly fail. Final sentence on this paragraph. Because self-deception is very common, especially on forums, we've established a peer review system which enables us to get a good idea of where you are in the process of awakening. Now that, with my experience of Liberation Unleashed, is a two-edged sword. First of all, I think it's good that many people will look at what is being said on a forum and gauge the person's level of realization to assist the person into knowing where they are. Because a person who has realized that there is no inherently real self will also be in a good position to establish if somebody else has reached the same place. And that's fine, good. But my main criticism with this process, in the experience I've had at Liberation Unleashed, is that many of the people there have latched on to nihilism. They have latched on to, essentially, the belief that the sentence, "There is no me, I do not exist," is right, true, and correct. And the statement or sentence, "There is a me, there is a self, I do exist," is incorrect. That is a position of belief. It is nihilism, and it will not assist anyone. As I said before in this video, and I'll just reiterate, the main reason why I do not believe it will assist is because you will no longer be willing or able to look into any further realizations. Let's give an example of a person who's depressed. A person who's depressed will have gone through this realization and realized there is no inherent self. But depression will still be there. Why? Because it was not examined. You examined the separate self. You did not examine depression. It's a different, separate thing. With nihilism in the picture, you will go to the people at Liberation Unleashed and say, "Yes, there's no me, I don't exist, but I'm still depressed." And their answer to you will be, look for the one who is suffering, look for the one who is depressed. You will realize that there is no one who is depressed. The person who is depressed does not exist. And that's your answer. Only it isn't, because you are still depressed. But because you've latched onto nihilism in such a way, you will not have the desire or ability or tools to look into things further, and you will continue being depressed. You will possibly have gone to Liberation Unleashed because you were depressed, seen Liberation Unleashed as a solution for the depression, gone through the process, and you will still be depressed. Only this time, if you've landed into nihilism, you'll be stuck with the depression, because you'll be stuck with a new belief system: there is no me who is depressed, even though you are still depressed. Both in the Buddhist path of the 10 fetters and emptiness, and in the Advaita path, do not land in this sort of nihilistic place. So a person is perfectly willing and in good position and able to look into further things without falling into some sort of nihilistic trap. And further down this page, there is nothing to get here in the tangible sense. Okay, fair enough. We don't offer any beliefs or dogma or religion. Well, actually, I'm sorry, you do. You offer a new belief that you don't exist. As well as that, they also state, all that exists is direct experience. And that's just another belief. Anyway, I hope you found the information in this video useful. Whether you agree with me or not, it's okay. That's my own current point of view and my own current feeling on what I see and my experience over the past number of years. If you have any criticisms of what I've said, or you want to put your own viewpoint across, please do write. Put a comment, or click like, click subscribe, and thanks for watching my video, and see you again in the next one. See you soon. Bye.